Somewhere on the line between Chicago and Detroit, a brand new train is already in trouble. Inside, passengers are bracing themselves against the seats because the whole thing is shaking out of control. Dishes are rattling, luggage is sliding, people are grabbing whatever they can reach. This was supposed to be the smoothest train in America. Outside, it looks like the future. Chrome curves, jet-age styling. General Motors built it to be their showpiece, a machine they said would bring people back to rail travel. This run is the first time it has ever carried real passengers. Before the day is over, one of the biggest railroads in the country will decide it does not want this train anywhere near its tracks. That decision will end the project. The question is, why a company with unlimited money and the best engineers in the world managed to build a train that fell apart the moment it was used? And here is the thing that makes this whole disaster so bizarre. General Motors was not some garage operation taking a wild swing at something outside their expertise. This was the largest corporation on the planet in 1955. They built locomotives. They built buses. They had unlimited money and the most talented designers in the world. The man who drew up this train, Chuck Jordan, was 28 years old and would later create the 1959 Cadillac with those massive tail fins. His boss, Harley Earl, had basically invented the concept of making vehicles look like rockets. So you had the absolute best people in automotive design working on this thing, and what they delivered was a machine that railroads could not give away. The Aerotrain looked incredible. That was never the problem. The problem was that General Motors decided to build the passenger cars out of bus bodies. Actual highway bus bodies, the same kind Greyhound used on their intercity routes, were bolted onto railroad wheels with an 18-inch strip added down the middle to make them wider. They figured the air suspension system that worked perfectly fine on their buses would work just as well on rails. And that right there is where everything fell apart, because a bus rolling over smooth asphalt at 60 miles per hour is a completely different engineering situation than a train slamming over steel rail joints at 80 or 90 miles per hour. The rubber air cushions that smoothed out highway bumps actually amplified the vibrations from the track, turning every single mile into a continuous series of jolts and lurches that made passengers feel like they were trapped inside a paint shaker. American railroads were desperate in the mid-50s, and that desperation is the only reason anyone took General Motors seriously with this project. The industry had gone from carrying 3/4 of all intercity passengers in 1944 to barely 30% by 1957, and the numbers kept dropping every single year. They were losing $700 million a year on passenger service, and the government forced them to keep running these trains whether they made money or not. Meanwhile, Washington was pouring billions into highways and airports, while the railroads got nothing but tax bills on their tracks and stations. So when General Motors rolled up with this aluminum beauty promising to cut operating costs in half and bring glamour back to rail travel, railroad executives were willing to try almost anything. The Pennsylvania Railroad tested it first, then the New York Central. The Santa Fe ran it between Los Angeles and San Diego in California. The Union Pacific put it on a new Las Vegas route, branding it the City of Las Vegas, and included a free buffet to attract gamblers heading to the casinos. Every single one of these railroads, after operating the Aerotrain with paying passengers, came to the same conclusion. The train was fundamentally unsuitable for the job it was supposed to do. The locomotive only had 1,200 horsepower, which General Motors insisted was plenty because the whole train was so lightweight. It turned out that claim was complete nonsense once the train had to deal with real terrain. The Santa Fe needed a helper engine just to get the Aerotrain up the Sorrento grade outside San Diego, a hill that regular trains handled without breaking a sweat. The Union Pacific had to bring in a much more powerful GP9 locomotive to push the Aerotrain up Cajon Pass on the way to Las Vegas. It had been marketed as a 100 miles per hour streamliner of the future, yet it could not climb a modest California hill without someone pushing from behind. That is the kind of engineering failure that makes you wonder if anyone at General Motors actually understood how railroads worked. But the real issue, the thing that made passengers swear they would never set foot on this train again, was what happened above 60 miles per hour. Those lightweight bus bodies started bouncing and rattling and shaking in ways that no amount of tweaking or adjustment could fix. Each coach weighed just 16 tons compared to 65 tons for a standard railroad car, and that lack of mass meant there was nothing to dampen the vibrations coming up through the wheels. Railroad men who experienced it at full speed said the suspension system beat passengers senseless. That sounds extreme, but anyone who actually rode the thing at 80 miles per hour understood exactly what they meant. The seats vibrated. The walls vibrated. Your teeth vibrated. This was supposed to be the luxurious future of American train travel, and it felt like riding inside a washing machine stuck on spin cycle. The New York Central gave it back to General Motors. The Santa Fe gave it back. The Union Pacific ran it for about 10 months and then gave it back. By late 1957, General Motors was sitting on 2 complete train sets that had cost them a fortune to develop and build, and not a single railroad in America wanted to buy them at any price. These trains had logged over 600,000 miles in demonstrations and trials, and the result of all that effort was exactly 0 sales. The only company willing to take these things off General Motors' hands was Rock Island, and they got them at a massive discount because they had a very specific plan. Forget the high-speed stuff entirely, and run them at low speed on commuter routes around Chicago, where the ride would be tolerable enough that passengers would not actively revolt. For 10 years, the Rock Island operated these trains between the city and Joliet at speeds well under 60 miles per hour. The cars had air conditioning, which was still a genuine luxury on commuter lines back then, so people put up with the mediocre ride because at least they were cool during those brutal Chicago summers. But nobody pretended this was the revolutionary future of transportation anymore. 2 of the locomotives and a few coaches ended up in railroad museums after the Rock Island finally retired them in 1966. You can still see them today, one in Green Bay, Wisconsin, and one outside St. Louis. And standing next to them, you understand why people in 1955 genuinely believed this thing represented the future. The styling is impressive even now. All sweeping curves and chrome accents and wraparound glass that looks like something from a World's Fair exhibit. Chuck Jordan absolutely knew how to make something beautiful. What General Motors never figured out was how to make it actually work on railroad tracks at railroad speeds. And that gap between how the Aerotrain looked and how it performed is the entire tragic story of this machine. General Motors, the company that had done more than anyone to put Americans behind the wheel of automobiles, tried to rescue the very industry their own products were helping to destroy. And they did it by using bus parts on a train. They assumed highway engineering would translate directly to rail, and they produced something that railroads rejected so completely that General Motors had to practically give the things away just to get them out of their inventory. The train that was supposed to save an industry is now a museum piece, a chrome monument to what happens when the biggest company in the world assumes it can master something it does not actually understand.